Welcome to the Read Aloud for Monday, June 1st. Alright, let's see where we were. We are on chapter something called In the Rose Bush, not Road Bush. When Miss Frisbee got home, Teresa, Martin, and Cynthia were eating supper, as she had told them to do if it got dark before she returned. Coming silently down the tunnel, she could hear them talking in the room below, and she paused a moment to eavesdrop on their conversation. Obviously, Cynthia had been worrying, and Teresa was reassuring her. She couldn't have got back sooner than this, Cindy. Do you remember? The crow said it was a mile to the tree. It might even be farther. Yes, but crows fly so fast. But if you went 2 miles high, that was Martin, it would be 3 miles altogether. 6, said Teresa. 2 up, 2 down, and 1 to get there and 1 to get back. That's right. No wonder she isn't back yet. But what about the owl? You know how owls are. I was still light when they got there. He couldn't see. It was still light when they got there. He couldn't see. But it's dark now, said Cynthia. Oh, I wish she'd come back. I'm scared. Not so loud, Teresa said. Timothy will hear. I'm home, called Miss Frisbee, hurrying the rest of the way down. And now it appeared that they had all been worried, for they ran to her, and even Martin, who ordinarily avoided such displays, threw his arms around her. Oh, Mother, cried Cynthia, near tears. I was so worried. Poor Cynthia. It's all right. How high did you fly? Asked Martin, recovering quickly. High enough so the trees looked like little bushes, the garden like a postcard, and the river like a snake. Did you see the owl? What did he say? I saw him. Later, I'll tell you about it. First, I want to see Timothy. How is he? Why didn't you move his bed out here? Teresa said I wanted to, but he said he'd rather stay in the bedroom. I think he's feeling worse again. But when Miss Frisbee went to see him, she found him sitting up, and his forehead felt not at all feverish. I'm all right, he said. I stayed in here because I want to think about something. Think about what? About moving day. Moving day? But why? What about it? He had, after all, overheard her talking to the others. Heard about her flight to the owl? But no, he was explaining. I haven't been outdoors since I got sick, so I don't know what it's like. I mean the weather. But today, this afternoon, I noticed something. What was that? A smell in the air, a warm, wet smell. If you sniff, you can still smell it, though it's not so strong now. Miss Frisbee had noticed this, of course, both indoors and out. It's the smell of the frost melting, Timothy went on. I remember it from last year, and after that, it wasn't long until we moved. Mother, when are we going to move this year? Oh, not for a long time yet, Miss Frisbee tried to sound as casual as she could. It's still much too cold, too early to think about. I have to think about it, said Timothy. He sounded serious but calm and unworried. Because if it comes too soon, I don't know if I can go. I tried walking a little bit today in here when the others were outside. Timothy, you're supposed to stay in bed. You'll make yourself sick again. I know, but I had to find out, and I didn't walk much. I couldn't. Only a few steps, and I got so dizzy I had to lie down again. Of course you did. You haven't really recovered yet. I guess I haven't. That's why I wanted to think. Timothy, you must not worry about it. That will only make you worse. I'm not worried at all. I thought I would be, but I'm not. Or maybe I think I should be, but I can't. What I really think about is how nice it is out there in the summer beside the brook. And it's true, I want to go, but I'm not scared. I was afraid you might be, or that you might think I was. That's really what I wanted to tell you. I'm just going to wait and see what happens, so you shouldn't worry about it either. Miss Frisbee realized that he had somehow switched their positions. He had seen the danger he was in, guessed somehow that moving day was near, and that he was very likely going to die. And yet here he was, reassuring her. She wanted to tell him about the owl and the rats, tell him that something still might be done, but she decided she had better not. She did not really know if they would help. It would be better to wait until she had seen them. So instead, she said rather lamely, Timothy, don't think about it anymore. When the time comes, we'll see how you are and then decide what to do. The next morning at daybreak, she went to see the rats. She had never been in the rose bush before, never really close to it, and now the nearer she got, the more nervous she became. No one had ever told her, nor, as far as she knew, told any of the other animals to keep away from it. It was just something one knew. The rats on Miss Fitzgibbon's farm kept to themselves. One did not prowl in their domain. She had, before coming out of the garden, looked around carefully to be sure Dragon was nowhere in sight. But even Dragon, though he would chase a rat up to the edge of the bush, would not follow him into it. The thorns, of course, helped to discourage trespassers. Miss Frisbee had never realized that until that moment, standing next to it, how very big the bush was, how dense, how incredibly thorny. It was bigger than the tractor shed, and its branches were so densely intertwined that as small as she was, Miss Frisbee could find no easy way to crawl into it, though she walked all the way around it looking. She remembered approximately where she had seen the rats go in, and she studied that part of the bush carefully. How had they done it? And then she saw that on one branch close to the ground the thorns had been scraped off, and about a half-inch of it, just big enough for a handhold, was worn smooth. She put her hand on this and pushed timidly. The branch yielded easily, rather like a swinging door, and beside it she saw a trail, a sort of tunnel through the bush, wide enough so that she could walk into it without touching thorns on either side. When she went forward, she released the branch and it swung back silently into place behind her. She was inside the bush and it was dark. She walked forward, peering into the dimness, and following the small trail which wound in a curving course toward the center of the bush, its earthen floor packed by the pressure of small feet. Then, straight ahead of her, she saw the entrance. She had expected what? A round hole in the dirt? Most likely, but certainly nothing like she saw. First, a sizable clearing about 5 feet across had been cut from the center of the bush. Branches overhead had been cleared away too, not quite to the top of the bush, but almost, so that sunlight filtered through easily, and soft moss grew on the ground. In the middle of this bright green cave rose a small mound 8 inches tall, and in the end of which was an arched entrance neatly lined with stone like a small doorway without any door. Behind the entrance tunnel, its floor also lined with stones, led backward and downward. Beside the entranceway, looking at her with dark, unblinking eyes, stood the biggest rat she had ever seen. Brutus, next chapter. "Stop where you are," said the rat. "How did you get in here?" "I walked in," said Miss Frisbee, keeping her voice calm with an effort. "I found a branch with the thorns smoothed off. I pushed it back and found—" "I know," said the rat rather rudely. "And now, walk out again. You aren't allowed in here." He moved a few inches toward her, placing himself between her and the entrance. She noticed how powerful his muscles looked under his glossy coat. He would almost be a match for Dragon. Almost, but not quite. "Go on," he repeated. "But I have a reason. I don't care what you have. Go away. You're small. I wouldn't want to hurt you." "Are you Justin?" Miss Frisbee inched back as the rat inched forward. "I am Brutus. Justin's not here." That was reasonably obvious, Miss Frisbee thought. The rat named Brutus added, "You know Justin?" "No," said Miss Frisbee. "That is not exactly." "If you don't know him, how do you know his name?" Brutus sounded puzzled, and Miss Frisbee observed that although he was greatly oversized and muscular, and his eyes were bright enough, he looked very young. It was told to me by a friend. Can I see him?" "Justin? No, he's at a meeting. I'm taking his place. They're all at a meeting but me." Bad luck, thought Miss Frisbee. "He's a substitute," she said. "Then I'll wait for him." "No," said Brutus, "you can't stay here. I've got orders. Now go or I'll take you out myself." He moved forward again. "My name," said the mouse desperately, "is Miss Jonathan Frisbee. I want to see Nicodemus." It did not work. "I don't care what your name is, and you can't see Nicodemus. That's sure." Brutus now looked both puzzled and annoyed. "Move on and be quick." "All right," said Miss Frisbee. "You needn't force me. I'll go." She turned slowly and walked back the way she had come. She felt like crying. After coming all this way, after flying to see the owl, to be turned back so abruptly at the end, she thought as she walked into the darker part of the bush. Maybe she could just wait for an hour or so until the meeting, what kind of meeting could it be, was over, and then go back, and perhaps the rat named Justin would be at the entrance then. But would Justin pay any more attention to her than Brutus had done? She had a feeling that he would. But when she stopped, she heard footsteps behind her. She looked back and saw that Brutus was following her. So she started again, hurrying to keep out of his sight. After a while, she paused again and listened. This time there was no sound. He must have gone back to his post. She sat down on the ground. Then, ahead of her, in the direction of the place where she had entered the bush, she heard a rustle, a faint scraping noise. It was the branch she had pushed to get in. Someone else was moving it. Someone was coming in, walking along the narrow path toward her. It must be another rat. Suddenly she was terrified. What would he do, meeting her unexpectedly here? She shrank to one side as close as she could get to the wall of thorns, hoping that whoever it was might go on past, not seeing her. Then he came around the curve and she saw him. It was her old friend, Mr. Aegis, the white mouse. He was moving extremely slow, and she realized that he was limping badly. One of his legs was injured. He was wrapped up in splints and bandaged. Mr. Aegis, she called softly. It's Miss Frisbee. Who? He peered into the shadow. I can't see you. Miss Frisbee, she moved into the middle of the path in front of him. Why, so it is, Miss Frisbee. How do you do? He sounded cordial enough, but he was startled. I didn't know that you. How did you happen to be in here? It's a long story. Then tell it to me while I rest. I'm supposed to be at a meeting, but I'm late already. And a few minutes more won't matter. As you can see, I had a bad fall and broke my ankle. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it doesn't hurt. It's mending, but I can walk only slowly and need to rest frequently. He sat down with a sigh. Now tell me what you're doing in the rat's bush. Miss Frisbee, who was wondering the same thing about him, told him as briefly as she could about Timothy, Jeremy, the owls, and Brutus. Mr. Aegis listened in silence, interrupting only once. So you went into the owl's tree? Yes, but I was afraid. I should think so. That took courage. I had to do it. When she had finished her story, Mr. Aegis sat quietly for a minute, considering it. Poor Timothy, he said at last. I should have thought of that myself. But of course, when I gave you the medicine, the weather had not yet turned warm. And then I fell and broke my leg, and I forgot all about it. He stood up. I think, he said, that you should come with me back to the entrance. But I can't. Brutus will still be there. Miss Frisbee, having done all that you have done, you are not going to give up now. I'll talk to Brutus. You know him? I have known him since he was born. He's not very old, you know. I think he will do what I ask. From the way he said that, Miss Frisbee could tell he did not merely think it, he knew it. But how? All right, she said doubtfully. I'll try again, but I don't understand. How do you know Brutus? We had better move along. They started back toward the entrance at Mr. Aegis' slow, limping pace. As to how I know Brutus, that's a much longer story than yours, and I doubt that I'm the one going to tell you. It is for Nicodemus to say. All right, we'll read more tomorrow.